So, Joe, how's the Obsidian computer coming that I tasked you with last episode?
I just want to preface this with you're mean because I ended up in the middle of at least 3 different conversations with 3 different people, asking them and working through how difficult is it to take a base Linux operating system and create my own version of the base Linux kernel. And unfortunately, one person said this is really difficult, and 2 people said, oh, just go here and do this, and it's actually not that difficult. Like, oh, curses. So I looked into this, Mike, and I am pretty sure I know the path forward and how to solve this and make it a thing. The question is it worth going down that path? Martin looked into it as well. So Martin, maybe you and I should connect on this.
It's totally
I
worth
even
it.
went as far as digging through my bank of old beat up laptops to see if I could find an old cheap Lenovo or HP something that I could use as a test model for this. And thankfully, my new custom PC that I got for encoding for live streams came in and overtook the time I was going to use to dig through all that stuff. So basically, Mike, you have inflicted pain upon my brain, and I continue to try to solve this problem. Thanks for that.
You're welcome. The world will thank you once you make these.
Yeah. Obsidian
There-
OS.
There are
yes.
literally 3 people in the Bookworm audience who are just waiting for this. You just got to make it and then start selling these things and then turn a profit. Like there's demand for this, Joe Buelig.
Yeah.
I'm telling you. Yep.
More than 10 people.
Dozens of people.
So you're telling me if I buy, if I can get them, base, like Linux loaded laptops, pour it over Obsidian OS on it, if that can exist, and turn around and sell the laptop, what would you pay for it, Mike?
Good question. I don't know. Probably a couple $100.
Because see, I think that would mean there's like no margin in it.
Sure.
Just gonna say that. Now, if it was something that you could make available and people who know how to load an operating system onto a computer know that it is not difficult at all. And if you're willing to do that, just doing the software side of it is actually not too far out of the question. The hardware side of it gets to be a whole different game.
Sure.
So,
well, I'm going to talk to Martin. We'll start up a Kickstarter. Well,
okay.
Something.
All right.
This thing needs to exist.
To answer your question, Martin, probably Debian would be the Linux distro to start with. From what I'm reading and following, that's probably the one that you build off of. What's Obsidian? You guys are funny.
Well, we won't go that far down the rabbit hole. Let's go to follow-up. And were you curious these last 2 weeks, Joe Buelig? I see what you did there.
I have done my best to use that simple, whatever you want to call it, sound effect in my life. And it is strange how powerful that is. It's so weird.
Yeah?
Whenever something is going on and I'm not sure why I made the bad choice that I did, if I audibly make that sound, it like forces your brain to go into problem solving mode. And it's so weird. And I feel like that's one little tiny trick that was worth the price of the book last time. I know I wasn't a huge fan of it, but I found great value in it. I'm going to attempt to continue this. And I know this was something that you were going to do. Have you done this?
I've done it just occasionally, though. It hasn't turned into like a big practice for me. But the comment that you made about that one thing being worth the price of the book previously, that got me thinking about all of the books that we have not liked over the years.
Yes.
And my son, Toby, who edits the podcast, he has been going through the backlog And every once in a while, I'll come home and he'll say something about an episode that he listened to, and he just listened to it. And I have no idea because that was years ago at this point.
Yeah.
Like yesterday, it was, wow, you really didn't like Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. It's like, I could tell you were really fired up in that one. I'm like, yeah, I was.
Yeah. It's fun that he can pick that out too.
Yep. So I think I've completed this once in a while, like occasionally, but it's not like a practice or anything. Sounds like maybe yours is more of a practice.
I don't know that I would say that. I have done it maybe over the last 2 weeks. Well, not even, maybe over the last week or so. I've probably done it 3 or 4 times. Whenever something has struck me as something that I'm doing something I don't like that I do, why? Like, whenever I notice that, that's whenever I would do it. But it's not something, it's definitely not daily and not multiple times a day by any means. But yes.
Sure. Okay. Well, that is it for follow-up. So I guess we can get into today's book.
Start the fun part.
Today's book is Creative Calling by Chase Jarvis, the founder of Instagram before Instagram.
That's fair.
He tells some pretty crazy stories. I had no idea, honestly, who he was when I picked up this book. But the thing that he's, I don't want to say best known for, but his story of most interesting note in the circles that we run in maybe is the fact that he had worked with some developers and launched a photo app called Best Photo based on the belief that the best camera is the one that you have with you. It blew up, and it was at the very beginning of the App Store, and the developers didn't really think that they could make a huge living off of it. They thought it was just a novelty sort of a thing. So it kind of disappeared because they weren't incentivized to keep updating it, and Chase couldn't do it himself. Eventually somebody created something like that, but free, and then it was bought by Facebook for $1 billion.
Yep.
And so he's got this like big what if, which, man, I props to him for getting past that one. There's some really great stuff in here where he talks about like missed opportunities and things like that. We'll get into that as we get into the book here, but that one alone, I feel like that colossal failure, in his words, gives him a lot of credibility. And so I think this is a pretty cool book that you should not disconnect from right now if you don't consider yourself creative. That's kind of his whole point, is that everybody is creative, and the book is broken down into 4 different sections, and it goes along with this framework he has called IDEA, where you imagine what you want to create, you design a strategy to make your dream a reality, E, execute your strategy and smash through obstacles, and then A, amplify your vision to create the impact that you seek. And so each section is essentially a step. Step 1, imagine. Step 2, design. Step 3, execute. And step 4 is amplify. And I have to say, as much as dislike the whole systems approach, that's kind of what this seems like at the beginning, I feel like the way he laid this out is very, very effective. And each one of these sections has 3 different chapters, so we're going to try to crank through all of these today.
Yeah, I think we'll be able to do it. There's a lot here, obviously, and I think you made a good point with, if you're not in a creative work environment, just remember everybody is creative in some way. Even people who consider their job or the things that they do every day monotonous and not creative. I think Chase and likely both of us would argue that either one, you're not looking at it correctly, or you're just in the wrong mindset for it. Because I think everybody's job is creative in some form. And even that, I think he would even say that once you connect with that, there is definitely room for a traditionally creative endeavor outside of that. as well. So he's kind of basing this off of like what you would think of traditionally as creativity, which is, in his case, photography is by far the big theme that runs through the book. But you can easily translate that to writing, to podcasting, to YouTubing, like whatever that endeavor is that you want to consider. Now, those are all the online ones that Mike and I tend to dabble in or do a lot in. So that's what, of course, is going to come to mind with us. But you can translate that to your own scenario for sure.
Yeah. And the big thing is just getting on the same page at the very beginning. That's the whole point of the introduction, in my opinion. Well, he does introduce idea here too, but the big takeaway from the introduction is that we are all creative, and unleashing your creative capacity, he says, is your highest calling in life. And I really like that. And I would challenge everybody, regardless of what your job title is or what position, what season of life you find yourself in, asking yourself, how can I express creativity in whatever ways that I have available to me? But once you find it, then you got to get busy. And that's where the rest of this book comes in. So let's start here maybe with chapter 1, which is inside the first step, imagine, but chapter 1 is hear your call. And the big point here is that we've all got these different personalities or different styles when it comes to the ways that we create. He runs through several of them: the starter, the noodler, the prioritizer, the resistor, the striver. But what you need to do is figure out, what is the way that you are creative, and then start to lean into that. And you can't just copy what somebody else is doing. You can admire somebody else's work, but you've got to find a way to make it your own. But the well of potential runs deep, he says, in every single one of us. And creativity is actually a boundless source of energy. That's very intriguing to me. And I feel like if all you did was figure out how to tap into that energy source by creating, and you used that at the beginning of your work routine before you went in and did your jobby job, that alone might be a huge benefit for you and reason why you should embrace your creative calling.
Yeah, I think this is, and he gets into this a little bit later for some like watch outs and such, but I think that this is a thing where if you're willing to set aside like the consumption habits that we all have, like it is way easier to come home from work, turn on a TV and watch a basketball game, or goof on Instagram Reels, or watch YouTube Shorts endlessly. Like, it's easy to do those things, but you're a lot more fulfilled if you're willing to flip that table and go from consumption to creation. And you hear that people talk about that a lot, like create before you consume. And there's a lot of energy that can come from that. And I know that sounds a little bit frou-frou, a little weird, philosophical and stuff, but it's not wrong. Like, I know that the days when I've been able to spend 20, 30 minutes writing, like, Mike and I read all the time. Like, we're reading 20, 30 pages a day, 15 pages a day. It doesn't take that many pages a day to read a book in 2 weeks. Like, that sounds like a great, big, lofty goal. It's really not that complicated when you break it down. But if you were to spend 15, 20 minutes creating something, there's something about that makes the rest of the day go really well. Like, if you do that first thing in the morning, there's just something that makes the whole day significantly better. And I think paying attention to that and just listening for that is a big part of this whole process.
Yeah, and then also recognizing this is a big thing that he mentions in chapter 1, but I feel like the meat of this comes later. But he says that you are not your art. So disconnecting your identity from the things that you make is very important, especially when you're just starting off and maybe you're dealing with imposter syndrome, or you find yourself just gravitating towards doing something exactly the way that one of your favorite creators does it. And that kind of gets into the next chapter, which is walk your own path. There's a acronym that he introduces here called DEAR, which I think is actually a pretty brilliant way to analyze and look at the way that somebody who makes something you love has done something, and then also envision opportunities to spin it and make it your own. So it stands for deconstruct, emulate, analyze, and repeat. And emulate does not mean do it the exact same way. It means that you're recognizing what the mechanics are that you really like about the way that they did something. And then when you try to imitate that, you do have to kind of watch and make sure that you're not doing it the exact same way. You got to put your own spin and flavor on it. But I feel like the more that you do that, the easier that becomes, the more natural it becomes. This is part of the process. This is what fascinates me so much about the whole PKM thing is like, if you understand personal knowledge management, there has to be an output. It can't just be the input. You can't just read the books. You can't just collect the notes. There has to be some sort of output, some synthesis, some analyzing that goes on of all these dots that you've collected and what does this mean to me? And then you just express that, and it's the natural result of the dots that you've collected. You don't have to judge the output, but without that output, it's like a water wheel. You have water coming in, but there's nothing going out. And instead of, a river where there's a constant flow of things, it becomes a reservoir or a cesspool because there's nowhere for the stuff that you've collected to go.
There's a lot in that. All this to say, like, pay attention. Like that's ultimately what I took away, at least from chapter 1 here, is like, pay attention and notice what it is that you like to do, and don't be afraid to start. Like, so many times people want to judge the results of their work early on, and like take if you're getting into YouTubing, like, let's use that example, because there are a lot of folks who are like brand new to
completely hypothetical example.
Completely hypothetical. And if you're getting into it, like, your first videos are always terrible. Like, take screencasting, Mike. That's probably a better example for us. Like, the first one you did, if you went back and watched it right now, would you be real happy with it?
Oh, dude, I could tell you a story about that.
Okay, go for it.
So when I started creating, I got this idea to write my book, but I had no idea how to write. So I started a blog and just wrote for an hour every day, published it before I went into the office, did it for 2 weeks. Asian Efficiency posted that they were hiring. I contacted them, not about a job, but about an opportunity to do guest posts. I'm like, well, we don't really do that, but if you have anything, send it in. So I sent them my blog and like, hey, this is good. We'll give it a shot. They also discovered a YouTube channel that I had started called Semi-Pro Workflows, which had a single screencast, which I recorded on my laptop while I was sitting on my couch. So no professional gear whatsoever. It was complete trash. 20 minutes of me rambling about how I use Text Expander. But that was the thing that Tan had identified, like, hey, that's pretty cool. You think you could do that for us?
Yeah.
And so I threw it out there. And even at the time, I thought it was horrible. But somebody else saw, like, hey, this has got potential, at least, even if it's not very good. So just the fact that I kind of accidentally shared that, that he stumbled upon it. I wasn't proud of that at all. I was kind of ashamed when he called it out. He said, hey, so is this you? And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's me.
I don't know where I saw this, but recently I saw someone say that they're not a failure, they're just getting started. Like, it's not that, like, your work isn't horrible. It's just like you're starting the process of getting good at it. Like, that's really what it is. But you have to be okay with it being actually terrible to start with, because it's gonna be when you first start. Like, if you were to pick up if I were to find somebody who has never talked in front of a microphone and try to podcast with them, I'm sure you've done this. It's almost painful, unless they're an extrovert and they just talk to people all the time and they can ignore the microphone, which is like nobody when it's the first time they're doing it.
Yeah.
It's like painful to get people to podcast with you the first time. But at this point, like, a lot of people are familiar with microphones and recording things because people record Zoom and such all the time. So, like, people are kind of used to that just in general. So it's not as common, but still, like, your first one's always terrible. I don't know how I got on this.
Crappy first drafts. Going
Yes.
back to what was that book by Anne Lamott that we read?
Bird by Bird.
Bird. Yeah, I'm gonna put that in the show notes here. But another big thing from this section, which I just want to use to encourage people, is he says that you need to start before you're ready. Kind of to your point, you're never going to be ready. And he says the risky path is playing it safe. Insecurity and discomfort are integral to the growth process. And he makes this comment that this is the riskiest time in history to play it safe. And I agree with that because we have all of these tools available to us. It doesn't matter. It could be podcasting. It could be blogging. It could be YouTube. It could be TikTok. It could be the next platform which hasn't been invented yet. You know, there's going to be a whole bunch of things which one of those just might click for you. And it might completely change your world. But you will never know that unless you put yourself out there. That's not something you can discover through reason and through logic. You kind of just have to do it and see how it feels. He talks a lot about intuition actually in this book, which I think is pretty cool. But just make stuff, fail fast, like just get it out there and see what happens, because I think there has never been a greater opportunity for creatives to find their niche and build a tribe or build an audience and make their art and be supported for it.
Yeah, I think this is where, like, if you go back to that acronym DEAR, like the reflect part of that, like looking back on what you've done, like that is really the point, I think, when you start digging into this, really. It's like, okay, make something and then evaluate it to see how you could do better next time. Like, he tells the story of him going on these big adventures from country to country throughout the world to take photos. But at the time, you had to develop the film, right? That was the whole dark room scenario. And he would write notes, like, second shot on this reel, I had these settings, like what f-stops, what shutter speeds, like he had all of that. And he would write all that down because it could be weeks or a month later before he developed the film, and he's not going to remember how he had it set. Like, in today's world with digital cameras, like, you can just adjust the ISO, adjust the white balance, all those things, unless you have a Blackmagic camera. And then you can say, this is what worked and what didn't. And then you can lock all that stuff in, and you know immediately whether or not it's going to be what you want. He didn't have that then. He had to write all that stuff down. And if that's what you need to do to determine what's working and what's not working with your craft, then go for it. Like, it's not rocket science, but at the same time, like, you have to be aware and just reflect on it.
Yeah, and maybe this is the spot to go into the next chapter, which is chapter 3, You Stand Out, because it kind of continues some of these themes that we're talking about here. But the big thing that stands out to me from this particular chapter is that a safe life is a small life. And he flat out says that most of us risk too little to really stand out. And that's part of the formula. Creativity requires risk. And so there's a barrier to be overcome there for every single person. But one of the things that can help you overcome that is recognizing that you will never be all things to all people. Not everybody's going to like your stuff. And just lean into what makes you, you. Because you're not going to get a whole lot of support in that area from the traditional systems that are in place. The educational system, he says, is designed with efficiency, not creativity in mind. And I completely agree. I mean, this is potentially a tangent, but big reason why we homeschool our kids. We don't want them to learn in order to pass a test. And even if you go beyond like middle school, high school, like, what is the path that is laid before you? It's go to college, get a good job, a safe job, which Chase is arguing that's not the way to go in today's digital economy. And I think he's probably right. When you take this book in line with a whole bunch of other stuff that we've read, like Deep Work by Cal Newport comes to mind, where he talks about the people who are going to be successful in the digital economy. And it's not the people who have a specific job title. It's the people who are able to think critically and do creative things that can't be automated, that can't be replaced by a machine, and creativity is one of those things. Creativity is what it is, it's distinctly human. And I know there's AI and all that kind of stuff that can write articles for you and yada, yada, yada. But I really think it doesn't compare to true art that a person can make. And so if you're able to interject that into the things that you do, what you're doing is you're making yourself, in Cal Newport's words, more valuable to the marketplace. And who wouldn't want to do that? That's the thing that's going to set you apart from everybody else and make you irreplaceable.
There's so many things that computers can do, but it's impossible for them to make the connections that human brains do. As much as people like to say that AI is going to take over so many different jobs, I feel like it's a long ways away. The more time I spend with these types of AIs and stuff, these so-called AIs, they're not even close. And part of the issue gets to be that it requires whoever writes that algorithm, whoever writes that software, somebody has a bias somewhere. And if they create that AI, they cannot help but have a bias built into it. And all you have to do is have a different bias, and you're now unique and different. This is also why, if you come back to, take podcasting and that world, it's been around a long enough time that there are podcasts on just about every topic, it seems like. But podcasters will all tell you should start a podcast. And the reason for that is because there will always be someone interested in your specific voice. And by that, what they mean is your particular perspective on a topic. I know that there are many people who listen to the things I say in the videos. I watch the videos and read the articles. I know there are a lot of people who do that because they know I come from a farming background, which is a bit weird to me. But they know that that's kind of a down-to-earth, blue-collar world that I come from. And I know that there are people that, resonate with that. And I definitely have strong farm roots. Even a couple of weeks ago, I had somebody that was bringing things, or it wasn't even that long ago, was bringing some stuff to store in our back shed. And I walked back there in leather boots and torn jeans and my John Deere ball cap that's all shredded. That's what I'm wearing. I've never seen you wear anything other than a button-up, Joe. Sorry, this when you get Joe down to the raw who he is, this is kind of what comes out. Apologies for that.
Yeehaw.
It's not far off. No cowboy hat, but we're not too far from it.
All right, so let's go into the next section here, and let's start in chapter 4, which is develop your systems. This is the part of the book that I didn't really care for. I understand the larger point he's making. I gotta say that because creativity is a formula, I believe. And so what he's saying is put yourself in a position where you can create consistently. Results come from establishing a consistent creative practice. And so that's really what this chapter is about. There's creativity zappers, creativity boosters, which is a summary of all the productivity advice that you have ever heard. And he's got this triangle thing here, which kind of shows, I forget what this is called, but
the creative pyramid.
He's got a name for this. Creative pyramid. That's what it is. Yep. Thank you. So at the bottom, you've got the mindset. That's the foundation of achievement and fulfillment. And then on top of that, you've got habits, which are behaviors that support your vision. And on the top, he's got goals, which is your desired outcomes. I think you could probably take the top of this pyramid off and be just fine. And would actually, if I were giving advice to creative people, being someone who has not been insanely successful like he has, I would say, yeah, remove that goals piece, because if you have a goal of, I'm going to grow my podcast to however many people, chances are you're not. Chances are when you start a YouTube channel, you're not going to end up with 3 million subscribers like Ali Abdaal. You kind of have to catch lightning in a bottle. Now you can work some principles and maybe you're not that successful, but you still are successful, right? So I think you don't really know what this thing is until you try it. But if you frame it as this is my goal, what that is implicitly saying is anything less than that is a failure. And I think that's dangerous. That's not exactly what he's saying here. But if you took this chapter out of context and just looked at this pyramid, I think that's kind of the assumption you would end up at.
See, I feel like the pyramid was one of the parts that I liked the most.
Okay, explain.
Which is why I was like, interesting. Mike didn't like this. That's totally backwards from what I thought you were going to say. But like, to me, like we talk about habits all the time, right? It's one of our favorite pet topics. And when we talk about habits, it's generally in the context of how do you build consistency and how do I make sure that I am doing the right things regularly, right? And the only way that you can decide what the quote unquote right things are is to have the right mindset. Like if I have a mindset towards evil, just to use general terms here, my habits are going to be evil, right? But if I have the mindset of becoming a good writer, my habits are going to revolve around, the ones I'm going to focus on are going to revolve around being a good writer. But the goals piece, I know, I suppose, now that I'm thinking this through, it does make sense to me why you don't like it. Probably the term goals by itself would be my guess. But the fact that he calls it goals, at least the way he explains it, I didn't take it as I want to grow my podcast to 5,000 viewers for every episode within 1 week. Like, I didn't take it as that was the type of goal. I took it as I want to become successful at XYZ, at being a podcaster, like, and just setting a very general direction. That was the way I took his goal terminology. It wasn't, this is a defined stake in the ground that I'm shooting for. It was like, here's the general area I'm shooting towards. That's the way I took it. But maybe I'm way off. Maybe I generalized it too far.
I don't know. I think there is a bias that comes through this book because Chase Jarvis has been very successful. Now, that being said, I think his message is great, but he's had a lot of things that have blown up for him. And even the one that he talked about that was a colossal failure, that was still more success than most people will ever realize on the App Store.
Right, right.
So he's kind of coming from this based on his experience, right? Where even his failures are awesome. And I feel like that maybe is a little bit hard to relate to sometimes. That being said, I also think that his mindset, he kind of challenges us right at the end of the book. Like, everybody you know that's successful has this positive mindset. And I think there's truth to that. And so there's probably a lesson for me to be learned there about being more positive. But goals anchor your expectations in weird ways. And I just don't think it's necessary at the beginning of the process. I understand why it's here. You know, goals are the thing that you're aiming at, and the habits are the things you're going to do every day as you make progress towards that thing. But I don't know. I think the very best thing you can do is just create and look at each thing that you create in context of this thing alone, not as part of a plan to get to a certain point, because there's going to be a lot of stuff that you'll find that's adjacent to the things that you're doing that are not going to be in alignment with the goal, but are going to be the right thing, the right next step for you to take. And again, that's my bias based on my personal experience, because I was going to do webinars, and then I started doing podcasts, and then I started screencasting, and like my creative path is all over the place. because it's like, oh, this is the thing. No, actually, that wasn't the thing. But this thing over here looks cool. Oh, that was really cool. Oh, that's not really it either. That thing over there. And you really just never know where your journey's gonna take you. So I think you need that flexibility to be able to chase whatever seems right in the moment. Whatever seems, I shouldn't say in the moment, whatever seems like the next best thing to do, that's the thing that you should do. And he does say that in here based on the intuition, right? You can't just crunch all the numbers and use that to determine the path forward. You kind of have to just feel it out. But goals work against you feeling it out, I think.
Maybe. I think it depends on the person. Because like the process you're talking about of switching from thing to thing, it's probably because like your mission ends up being more about helping people than it is making videos. Because like some people, making videos is the thing and they want to help people through that avenue. But I feel like yours is the other way around. Mine's the other way around. Like I want to help people. Thus, like sometimes it's easier to write things. Sometimes it's easier to video record those. Sometimes it's better for me to go to you in person and let's talk to you in person. Sometimes it's better to do a one-on-one coaching session. Like I'll do all of those things because I'm trying to help people where they're at. And that's not the creative goal for a lot of people. Like some people just love to try to capture moments with a camera. And that is what they're after. Now, it might be video that they're trying to capture a moment. Some people love making stock video. Like that's a thing. Chase would say his thing is capturing moments through stills. Like that's what he wants to do. And he loves to do that. So that was kind of his direction, the goal that he was shooting for. Like, how do I make this my all-time thing? So maybe that's the fluidity. So all I'm saying is I think it depends on the person and what you're after. That's where that whole mission part comes in.
Yeah, I think if he and I were to sit down and talk through this, we're much more in alignment than I'm making it sound right now. But goals, I mean, come on, goals are dumb.
Yeah. But he does follow this up with like all the buzzword stuff. Like he's got the creativity zappers and what are the positive ones called?
The boosters. I do appreciate that he calls out that most productivity advice is a waste of time.
Yeah. Yes. And then he rattles it off like in rapid fire, like meditation, cold showers, gratitude, fitness, like all these things. Stay away from social media and news. Like it's rapid fire over the span of like 5 pages. Here you go. Here's the bulk of what all the productivity nerds are going to tell you.
Yeah, but again, like this fits in the line of everything that is in this book, because this is kind of necessary before you get into the next chapter. So let's go there. Actually, chapter 5 is make your space. And so if you're going to go into this without the list of the zappers and boosters, this is a complicated chapter. But if you recognize that there are things that you can do, just little things throughout your day that are going to boost your creativity, and you avoid the things that are going to zap your creativity, this feels much more approachable now to create a regular creative practice, which is what he's calling you to do in chapter 5. In fact, that's one of the 2 action items that I had from this book was from this chapter, which was identify when I'm going to create. I want to map out my ideal week and figure out what are the hours that I have available to me around all the stuff that I do with the day job where I can work on my own art. And by the way, that's something that we should probably talk about at some point. I read a Derek Sivers essay. I think it was part of Heck Yeah or No, but he talked about your work and your art. And I really attached to that essay. And what he talks about is you want to have a job, which is going to take care of your needs. And that frees you up to make your art and not worry about making it commercially viable. And when I read that, I was like, yes, that makes a ton of sense to me. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not going to accept any sort of financial gain from any of the things that you've made, but there isn't the pressure for those things to feed your family. And I've noticed that, like, when your art becomes a job, it changes the way that you approach it. It doesn't have to necessarily steal the joy from it, but there's the potential for that, where it's like, oh, this is something I have to do instead of something that I want to do. Right. So going into this chapter and based off of, that essay, and I was like, yes, that's the thing for me, I'm going to design my life around that essentially. I want to identify the time that I'm going to create. And the big thing he's talking about here is that you've got to show up every day. In fact, he says the times when you're stressed, those are the times when it's important to stick to the schedule. Very a la James Clear, never miss twice sort of a thing. The bad workouts are the most important ones. That's kind of what this is about. And there's a whole bunch of stuff in here about establishing your workspace, finding and creating a schedule, not letting the lack of ideal conditions stop you. And I kind of feel like I wish I had read this several years ago, because at this point, I don't really have my studio and my office set up. Like, I have all the tools that I need in order to create the stuff. But it's been a long time coming. And I feel like several years ago, I could have used the advice of don't worry about getting the right gear, just start making things. And his whole story is that, he was a professional photographer, and he just starts taking pictures with his crummy iPhone camera, and he's like, this is amazing. And he becomes the mobile photography guy. If anybody has the credibility to say, like, don't worry about the tools, it's Chase Jarvis.
Right. Yeah. I watched this is very telling. If you know the name Harris Heller, I got into watching his YouTube videos for a while because he was talking about gear and like making videos for YouTube and such. Like, he was talking about that sort of thing. And he kept like having these conversations with his audience. He did some live streams and stuff and was talking about how the tools don't matter. Like, focus on your idea and use what you have when you're first starting. And then if you earn money from it, take that money not to buy the gear you really want, but to buy whatever it is that would take your thing to the next level, whether that's graphics or a brand, a website, like whatever that is. That's what he would encourage you to do. Well, he got finished with one of these videos where he was explaining all of this, and it was really well done. And he got to the end, he's like, just to prove to you that I practice what I preach, this entire video was shot and edited on my phone. And like, I could have swore he was on some top end. He's got 5 or 6 DSLRs that are mirrorless. He's got a Blackmagic camera that's like the 6K thing. Like, he's got all these fancy lenses and stuff. And he shot that thing on his phone, and I did not know it. So it doesn't always matter. Like, if you have a phone in your pocket, there's a good chance that it will do almost anything that you can think of when it comes to the creativity world. But you just have to be willing to use it for that, if that's what you want to do. Now, obviously, if you're a painter, your phone's not going to do too well with that. I don't recommend taking oil paints to your phone. Not a recommended task I would put on your table.
Fair enough. I found the link to that essay. I'm going to paste it in the show notes here. This is really good. And basically, the lifestyle, the happiest people he knows, he says, they have a well-paying job, and then they seriously pursue their art for love, not for money. And I feel like that is very much in line with what Chase Jarvis would tell you, but then he's had commercial success as well.
Right. Right. Yeah, and it is true. Like, I know I've done like code projects and website projects as a job before, and I love building those things. It takes all the fun out of it when it's like required for my income. Like, it's just not something I like doing when I need it to work and I need it to come in. But whenever it's something that I'm going to go do because it's fun, like as an example, my wife and I just launched kind of a local business of sorts called Acorn Ridge. We kind of affectionately refer to our property as Acorn Ridge. So we decided to start doing like cooking classes and such out of our house, and Becky does like leather working and stuff. So she just decided to start selling some of that stuff online. And I was like, great. So obviously I'm the web developer, right? So in the span of like 2 days, we had a website up and running, have a store running. Like, these are all things like I will gladly do these things and we'll perfect it. But if I was being paid to do that, I'm like, it would always be about how am I going to get the money out of this to pay for my kids' shoes. But when it's something like this, like I love doing it for myself 100% of the time.
Yeah.
So anyway, stuff like that, it just changes the game. It totally does.
Yeah. And if you're thinking to yourself, well, that's great. You've got lots of time to invest in something like that. That's another big theme in this chapter, is that you need to understand what are your priorities. And he says there's two places that we can understand our priorities: our calendar and our bank statement. What do you spend your time and your money on? And he says that we give away a lot of time to things that don't matter. And I think that's true of everybody I have ever met. So if you say you don't have time for your art, just take stock of where you're wasting your time. Right. And you can find a little bit here or there. Spoiler alert, I guess, for my action item. I already started working on this, and I was kind of shocked at how much time I was able to find for creating when it became a priority for me.
But that's kind of the theme here of make your space, right? In chapter 5, it's like, okay, he's not only talking about your workspace, but more the head space and time space for it. So if you're not setting aside time for it every day, it won't come true. Just spoiler alert there.
Yep. And there's another piece to this, which is in the next chapter. So let's go to chapter 6, which is do your best work. Because he says in this chapter that you just need to do this over and over again. Repetition is the mother of skill, and you don't need a blueprint, just a direction. Because you could have the time to create, and you sit down, you're going to write, and you just stare at the blinking cursor. I've been there. I'm sure you have too, where you're like, okay, I've got the time. I'm going to do the thing. I'm geared. I'm ready to go. And then nothing. Like there's no creative juice flowing. And I don't deal with that a ton. Most of the time I have too many things bouncing around as ideas, and I can't pick the one I want to work on, which is why this is where my other action item comes from, because he talks about creating the prompt for the next day before you leave. And I think this is kind of genius. This isn't the first time I've heard this idea. There's a very popular blog post that Sean Blanc wrote several years ago on The Note. And basically, it's the idea that he would take an index card, put it on his keyboard, and it would have the writing prompt for the next day, so that when he came to write, he didn't have to decide. It was right there staring at him. And I want to start doing that, because I'm recognizing that the time that I have to create consistently is going to happen at the very beginning of my day. And so I don't want to get here and then have to figure out, what am I going to write about? What am I going to make? I want it to be ready to go. And I feel like at the end of the day, when I am tired, that's kind of the ideal point for me to just pick something to work on the next day. It's like, who cares? Just pick one. Right. And that's the value in it, is like you get that down, and then the next day you don't have to spend any effort trying to figure out what is the thing that you're going to create. You've already got the prompt, and you just have to follow through and take action on it. I feel like that is going to be very effective for me, but I'll report back.
Yeah, I've read Sean's article, The Note. It's been years ago. How old is that? 4 or 5 years old now? It's been a while. And yeah, I remember reading that. It's like, oh, that's a great idea. And I did it once, and I've not done it since, because what happens, at least for me, and this is also why I don't plan today, because the moment I sit down and start planning what's going to happen tomorrow, I start trying to do it now. Because the moment I write, like I did his note card thing, and I did it once, because what happened was I wrote it on the note card, but then my brain started writing it immediately. I was like, oh, that's an amazing intro. Like, let me write that down quick. 30 minutes later,
at the end of the
I had a rough draft done and did not leave until I got it out of my head. It's like, nope, I cannot do this. Like, it will not work. And even like people say, time block your day tomorrow, today, like that whole concept, plan tomorrow. What are you going to do tomorrow? Even if it's not time blocked, like I can't do that. I end up going down this whole process of like trying to like, oh, well, that one's only going to take a few minutes. I could just do that now, and then I don't have to worry about it. Like, no, I cannot do these things. Like, that's why when I get to the office, the first thing I do is run through and decide what's going to happen today. And then my brain will take off and start doing those things. It works way better for me. So I cannot do that. I wish I could. It sounds great. No, it's a bad day.
Well, that points out kind of an important point here. I think, Chase has written this from his experience and he's sharing the things that are working for him, but I can totally understand how that is just not going to work for certain personality types. And you do have to kind of figure this out for yourself. But just reading through this, you don't get the impression that there's any wiggle room here.
No.
Like, this is the system.
Correct. Yeah. The way I took it was like, no, you have to do this. If you consider yourself a creative, this is what you have to do. It's like, nope, that ain't happening.
Yeah. He even says in this chapter that if inspiration strikes, you write it down and you go back to the task at hand.
Yep.
And I think for you, probably that's just not going to work.
Because that's, again, that one day I tried to do it. I was trying to do that. I was trying to write down the ideas I had so that I could go back to what I was doing. But then 30 minutes of like incessant ideas for how it was going to, like, I should have just finished the thing. Like, it was better off that way.
Yeah, I think I've mentioned to you Jesse J. Anderson. Mm-hmm. He writes a lot about ADHD, and he is writing a book about the things that he's learned with his own diagnosis with ADHD and how he's, I don't want to say overcome it, but like the productivity systems that work for him and the productivity systems that don't. From a perspective of like neurotypical, this is what I was taught growing up, to this is what actually works for me dealing with ADHD. And I'll put a link to the book in the show notes. It's not out yet. He's in the process of writing it, but he's got like the table of contents and stuff available if you are interested in that sort of thing. But I instantly thought of that when I got to this section 2, where it's like very cut and dry. This is the process that you follow. I didn't spend a whole lot of time thinking about it, but in the back of my mind, I was like, I bet Jesse Anderson and Joe Bulig would have issues with this.
Yeah. I just signed up for Jesse's. He's got an email newsletter called Extra Focus. Extrafocus.io, I think, is where you go to do that. That's all it is just a sign up page for the newsletter. So I just signed up for it. Can't tell you if it's any good or not, but I assume it is.
Well, I really appreciate his style and his writing. He's been a guest on the Focus podcast, and I think he does a real great job of just sharing the struggles that he's gone through and like the lessons that he's learned and having to figure this out for himself. Like, I go back and forth with this every time I hear somebody talk about their experience with ADHD. It plants the seed in my head of maybe I have this and I should go get it checked out, but I've never done it, and I don't want to self-diagnose myself because certainly my symptoms, if you want to call them that, are not to the extreme level of some of the stuff that like Jesse's described. But I do empathize with being told, especially like growing up, like, you just got to focus, just stay on task, and just, you can't do it.
Right. But at the same time, like
physically not able to, he's got to hack his own system.
Correct.
And that's totally not fair.
At the same time, like I'm learning this. It's very easy for people who are diagnosed ADHD to use that as an excuse. And
okay.
like, I hesitate to even say this. A lot of people that I talk to, myself included, will use that as kind of it almost puts like the victim mindset in there. It's like, I have this thing. I'm stuck with it. I have to deal with it. And it makes life so much harder for me. So obviously I'm not going to be as productive as someone else. If I can get the laundry done today, it's a successful day. Like, people have that victim mindset whenever they're diagnosed. And like, I don't want to just accept that negative mentality. Like, yes, I know that it makes some things harder, but there are a lot of times when I choose to make it harder unknowingly at times. But if I will step back and acknowledge that was harder, but it was because I chose to make it harder, or accepted or used this victim card to make it harder, and hoping somebody else will just magically set me free from this thing. Like, you get what I'm saying? Like, I don't want it to be an excuse. Like, yes, it's something that I struggle with, But even that, like, it's a thing where I struggle with it in some areas, but it's a very big benefit in other areas. And I'm aware of that. But we like to focus on the negatives a lot of times, like the creativity piece, like coming up with ideas on what to write about. That has never been a problem for me. Like, just sit down and look at, like, I wrote down, I think, 12 ideas earlier today, just because I realized, oh, my idea bank for what I'm going to write about is quite low. Okay, well, here's some more to add to it. Like, just, it was that simple.
Yeah.
So I don't ever have that blinking cursor problem really at all. I don't think I've ever dealt with that.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between playing the victim card and recognizing your natural tendencies. And I think that's the thing that kind of rubs me wrong about this is there's no room for that. You know, in creative calling, it's just, this is the way you create because this is the way that I create. But I think you do got to figure it out for yourself. And that actually leads into the next section in the next chapter. Chapter 7 is make it till you make it. Well, if you never figure out how to flow in the way you're wired, you're never going to establish a consistent routine. And that's really what this is all about, is you just make your art, you do it consistently. You don't judge it. You just keep getting it out there. And the fact that you keep getting it out there, that's the thing that makes it good. I mentioned to you before we started recording, I am going through Ali Abdal's part-time YouTuber Academy. And he shares some statistics in one of the sessions about the number of videos that it takes to reach 1 million subscribers or something like that. And it was an insane amount of videos. It's like 1,300 videos before you would hit 1 million subscribers. Like the average channel that has 1 million subscribers. Now, you can learn faster and you can get there sooner. It may take you longer too, but the point is that you can't worry about the quality of the stuff that you're publishing at the beginning. His point in that session is like, you just got to make stuff, and you got to make a lot of stuff. Yep. And you just got to get it out there, and you got to get the feedback. And when you start doing it, I think the chart that Chase Jarvis shares in this section is pretty accurate. You know, the joy goes up at the beginning. You've got this great idea. You add design and detail to the vision. You begin executing, and then it gets hard, and then it dips below the line, and you're like, this project is terrible. I suck at this. And then you start to come back up. Oh, maybe I can do this. I think I'm going to get through this. And then you come back up at the end, and you're like, hey, this is pretty good. And I'm so glad that I stuck with it. And that's kind of been the story that I've heard from everybody who has done any sort of creative practice consistently and become successful at it, is like, there was always that valley. And that's the point where you've got lots of logical reasons to give up on the thing, but you just stick with it. And eventually you come out of that. And that only comes through consistency. And you're never going to be consistent if you don't recognize what you are fighting against, especially yourself.
Yeah, because the thing that a lot of people do is stop when they're in that valley because it's too hard and it doesn't look like what they want. And so they quit. And guess what? Then they don't ever get to the point where, hey, this is pretty good, or I'm so glad I did this. Like, you never get to that point if you quit early. So you have to keep going. I mean, it's the same thing with blogging, right? You know, people tell you, like, when you're first starting, you want to blog a ton, like every day, kick out a blog post. Well, it's not because, like, that is the release schedule that you need to be successful. It's because you're trying to hone a craft and you're trying to do it fast. Like, that's why. Mm-hmm. And posting every day can get you there, but you're also trying to build a backlog. Like, when you first start a blog, you have 0 blog posts. And the people who have been blogging for a long, long time, who have great big followings, have 4,000 blog posts on their site. So you can go search and find a backlog, and there's tons of stuff to look through. But if you have one, like, there's only one thing to go there for, and there's nothing to come back for and learn more from and look forward to the next thing. So you have to get a lot out there. But at the same time, like, the faster and the more often you can do your thing, the better you get at it faster. Like, I think the only time I've seen, you mentioned YouTubing and like how many videos it takes. There are some exceptions to that, of course. But generally, those exceptions are when the people involved either have been doing video work prior to going to YouTube or have done YouTube elsewhere. There's usually not a shortcut. And if you think there is, and like, oh, they came out of nowhere and they did really well. Like, I've heard that from some folks. It was a couple of folks that found Bookworm that I met this past Sunday at church. And they said something about podcasting. I was like, yeah, I do some podcasts. He's like, oh, I found this really good one lately. It's called Bookworm. It's like, hey, cool. Who's on that?
That's me.
And like this guy, Joe and Mike, and they read books like every 2 weeks
from America.
And like it's just a really cool concept. And I was like, hi, I'm Joe. And they're like, what? Like just blown mind. And it's like, it was really cool. It's kind of the first time I've had that experience with Bookworm. But it was so fascinating. It's like, okay, like, well, Bookworm just kind of came out of nowhere. Like, no, we've done this for years. Like we have in the realm of podcasting, we have a big backlog of episodes that you could go listen to. And when it takes 2 weeks to make one, like it takes a long time to build that up. So anyway, it just takes time. I'm rambling.
Yes, it does. You ever think about how much effort has gone into that Bookworm backlog?
Way more than I ever imagined it would take. But I also didn't know how long we'd last.
Yeah. So this is episode 141. Each episode is like an hour and a half times 2 for 2 people.
Yep.
And then you have to read all the books. And then we have to edit the episodes, publish them. Like, it's an insane amount of work.
Right.
In no world is this quote unquote worth it.
Correct. Yes.
Other than this is how we learn. I mean, there's intrinsic reward from creating this, which goes beyond the monetary reward we get from it.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at just like the work hours to release, like to record and release an episode, like by the time we make the outline, like forget reading the book, we make the outline, we do the recording, you do the editing, you do the posting. Like you've got 3 hours in the recording because there's 2 of us. There's probably 15, 20 minutes, you'd say, in outlining, maybe a little bit more than that, depending on the book. The editing is probably on average, time and a half, 2 times as long as the episode. So time you get posting and stuff, there's somewhere around 7 hours in just the recording and publishing for one episode. Now I'll count for how many hours do you think it takes to read the book in 2 weeks, Mike? Like if it's...
Oh, it depends on the book, but...
Maybe 4.5, 5 hours, 5 hours or so over the span of 2 weeks.
At least, especially the way I take notes.
Yeah, so if you call it 5 hours times 2 of us, that's 10. So now we're at like 17. There's probably some fluff in there, so call it 18 hours. Every episode is the amount of time it takes to do that. What is that? 18 times 141?
So if you go into it thinking that I'm going to do this for a while, and then it's going to be giving me a pretty nice paycheck. Like you don't get into a podcast, you don't get into a blog, I would argue you probably don't even get into YouTube at this point because it's not new enough. There was a point where if you just appeared on YouTube and it didn't matter the quality of the stuff you were making, just the fact that you were there, you were being rewarded for that. But now you've got to put in the work. And the only way it makes sense is if you're not doing it for monetary gain or you're leveraging an audience or a tribe that you've already created. That's kind of getting into
for what it's worth.
Later chapters in this book.
That number was just over 2,500 hours to get to 141 episodes.
It's a lot of hours.
It's a lot higher than I thought it was.
Yep. But the real reason that we do the podcast is that you and I learn a ton from it, which is kind of what gets into chapter 8 here. University, spelled Y-O-U. This is my favorite chapter in the entire book. And probably because it reinforces some things that I had already felt. A big reason why we homeschool our kids is that we want to teach them to be lifelong learners. And we want them to learn in order to solve problems that they are experiencing, not learn to pass a test. And he mentions that school is kind of set up as something that you endure in order to get a job. And that's not the thing that's most helpful. You need to develop this lifelong learning mindset. You've got to identify your own learning path. And he said that the primary struggle of today's learners is figuring out what you want to do because there are so many opportunities. And I think that is really true. But the way that this fits into the creative process is this formula where you create, you learn from it, and then you repeat. Create, learn, repeat. Create, learn, repeat. I mean, that's the whole goal. I mean, that is why you would create. And then if you do that and you do it long enough, eventually the score is going to take care of itself. But again, you're not doing it, I would argue, with a goal in mind of, I want to build an audience. I want to have 10,000 downloads per episode, or I want to make so much money from ads or anything like that. If you have a goal like that, you're just going to be disappointed at how long the thing is going to take. You do have to learn to love the journey. And when you approach it with that mindset of just curiosity and like, what can I learn from this and how can I get 1% better, there's a lot of value to be had there.
Yes. I think you're right. This is probably one of the most important in the book. And that's because like you have to pay attention to yourself. When do you work best? What gives you the fuel the best? Like, here's an example. Like whenever I want to come up with a whole bunch of ideas for something, if my race car brain hasn't already come up with 45 million of them, then what I do is go look through, like, let's take blogging, for example. If I want blog post ideas and I don't have them, I go cycle through my RSS newsreader, which is NetNewsWire. If you don't use that, you should use that. And I will run through
Yes, you should.
all of my RSS feeds, because what happens is I'll be reading those articles and like, oh, like they do this, but I do something slightly different. And then I'll write down that idea. And then like, oh, 1Password released this. I use that this way. I should write about that. Like all of those things become blog post ideas. If I wanted to come up with screencasting ideas, like, well, go watch some of Mike's screencasts because surely he's done better than me. So I can find the thing that he didn't talk about. That's definitely very developer codey, and he doesn't do that. So I could fill in that area. Like that's what I could do. So like I could take some of what he does and build on it. That's the sort of thing I would do to get those ideas. Use the consumption side of the equation to drive the creativity side of it. So like that's a lot of what I do. I have learned that just by understanding how I operate. And I wouldn't know that had I not developed kind of the growth mindset piece, to go back to Carol Dweck. If I hadn't done that, I wouldn't be anywhere near capable of doing the type of thing I do now. So that's what I do. But again, the whole point is just learning about yourself.
Yeah, learning about yourself, continuing to make your stuff. And then chapter 9 is you must fail to succeed. And the big point here is that even if you're doing everything right, lots of opportunities are going to get away. And this is where you find out all the details about best photo, and your heart kind of breaks for him at that point.
Yeah.
Because he was totally doing it before Instagram. It was a paid app, but they still had a crazy amount of users. And the developers just decided, the way the contract was written, they were never going to get rich off of this thing, and they just stopped updating it. And then a couple people got together after Best Photo was gone, did what Best Photo was doing. Facebook buys them for $1 billion. Man, that stinks.
Yep.
But there's some really cool quotes in here. He mentions Richard Branson, who said that opportunities are like buses. There's always another one coming. I really like that. And I want to try to internalize that, because I tend to fall into that category where I beat myself up on missed opportunities. But being able to release those things, I think, is important if you're going to engage with the next one and really make the most of going forward, not living in the past. He also says on page 206 that most great ideas are never realized because we talk ourselves out of them before we even give them a chance. Guilty. Perfect is the enemy of the good. That's not something that is brand new, but if you have perfectionist tendencies like I do, You never get the thing out there because no one's going to like this. It's not good enough. That's my big struggle with YouTube. I look at the people that I like on YouTube and I'm like, they just look so confident in front of the camera. And I don't think I could do that. Even though when I take a step back and I think about it, like, what do you need to do in order to be successful on YouTube? I have the skills. Like the Toastmasters experience is a big thing. Like that's a whole section of Ali Abdaal's course. And he's actually making a separate thing, I think, on just like camera confidence. You know, I've gotten up and spoken in front of enough people that like I can do that. And still I get nervous about publishing a YouTube video. I mean, come on, get over it.
Right.
Just do it, right? Lean into it. Yeah, it's scary, but it's always going to be scary. That's kind of the thing from here. And so that's why I signed up for that course. As I was thinking about it, like, that's the next thing for me, the next thing in my journey. I don't know exactly what this is going to look like. And as I'm thinking through, like, what are the types of videos that I want to make? I'm already doing the sermon sketch note stuff, but I want to go beyond that, obviously. I want to create videos where I'm speaking to the camera and I'm sharing different things. And there's probably screencast stuff in there too about like how I'm doing things in Obsidian or whatever. But one of the things that I was thinking about is like, we get on and we record these episodes where we talk back and forth about these different books, but I take all these crazy notes and I try to summarize it in a couple of sentences. And my most successful newsletter I ever sent was the best book I read this year, you know, which was about the great mental models, spoiler alert. Like I could totally record a quick YouTube video about that. Say, hey, we mentioned this in Bookworm episode, whatever, if you want to learn more about what I think about this. I mean, it doesn't have to be hard. And I've created all these obstacles in my own head.
Yes.
And I just got to start doing it.
This is one of the, remember we were talking about, okay, personal Socrates. Whenever we went through all that, I mentioned one of my action items was I wanted to go through all those questions. Well, one of the things I did was write down a question that I ask myself every single morning now. This is like a whole process thanks to you, Mike. And one of those questions is, what limits am I setting on myself? And I hate answering that question. Because the moment you answer that question is the moment that you can't allow that limit to last any longer. And it is very common for me to place the limit of, I don't do this on social media because it's too complicated, or I don't post on my website because I made it too much of a process to do that, or I don't write because I feel like I have to have this particular system in place. Like so much of my stuff is systems based that like, and this is a big action item for me. Like I've got a handful of things. I spent like this last week with my entire like content creation space and just automating as many of the small, tiny steps as I can get. Like it's nuts the type of things I've just put in place. I've got a script now. Like I can type in Twitter handle and just hit a thing and it automatically makes a markdown link for that person's YouTube or Twitter handle and links to their Twitter. Like it's just stupid, simple stuff like that. It just makes the process so much quicker. So yes, all the things. All
right. So we're in agreement that we're going to be creating the next section
right.
Here is step 4, amplify. And the first chapter in this section is chapter 10, find your people. And this is really about the importance of a community. And one of the biggest aha moments I got from this book was from this chapter, because there is a Venn diagram in here, which maybe you're rolling your eyes when you hear the words Venn diagram. But there's a Venn diagram that talks about, in his experience, the craft community, which for him was photography. The focus community is other circle, and that is for him action sports. And the core community, action sports photography, that's where those two overlap. And I don't know why the lights finally went on for me when I saw this, because I have this whole brand of faith-based productivity, right? So I've got the faith circle on the one side and the productivity on the other side. And I think if I were to define this for myself, my craft community is probably the productivity one. And the focus community, that's probably the faith one. And then the core community is the place that those overlap. I don't know why. Maybe this is obvious to you and everybody else is looking at this from the outside in, but I never realized how those two overlapped. And I was having so much trouble trying to define, like, who is it really that I'm trying to help? Going through Ali Abdal's course, you're crafting like your intro and finding your niche and things like that. And it's like, hi, I'm X and I help Y do Z, right? That's kind of like the standard intro for if you're going to have one in your YouTube videos. And so I've really been thinking about this. And when I saw this Venn diagram, it just clicked for the first time. And I was like, oh, this is easy. Like, this is how these things line up in my life. So if I got nothing else from this book, that was worth it.
Oh, Mike. Like, when you first told me faithbasedproductivity.com, like, what you just explained was immediately where my brain went. I wish I'd known you were struggling with this. I probably could have explained it to you. Like, I feel like I've known this for a long time.
I knew it. I don't know how to explain this. I knew it, but I didn't know it, if that makes any sense. Yeah. Like, I understood it logically, but it finally clicked for me when I saw this Venn diagram. And I've been challenged by some of the people in my mastermind group to really lean into this. And so in order to lean into it, like, got to figure out who are these people and how do I help them? And I kind of knew stuff happens over here, stuff happens over there, but didn't really know how it aligned in a way where I could really make something of value for the people in the middle. And this was, seeing this Venn diagram was kind of when the lights went on and I got excited. It was like, oh, I get it.
Yeah. There's something about this because it struck a chord with me as well. Like, I know that, like, I definitely have like the digital space coding, scripting world that I do, but then I've got this like analog Joe thing over here that I haven't done much with in the last, I don't even know how many months. And I've been like, okay, I'm like in a spot where I want to like revamp all this and like kick it off again, and make this a long-term play. And I think I've got some of that in my head, but it has a lot to do with this concept of like, what is this focus group? What is what are these two spheres and how do they overlap? And it doesn't have to be two. I feel like it could be more than that, but the more spheres you put in place, the smaller that overlap is, which means the more niche of an idea that you have. So I'm still kind of wrestling with what that exact niche is, but I feel like I'm really, really close to that because I've never really had like a unified brand across everything I do. And based on what I'm working through, I think that finally clicked for me. So maybe at some point I should talk to you about this, but it's still something I'm working through at the moment. But anyway, all that to say, finding your people, like this particular chapter is one that's, I think, important once you start getting some traction in your craft, but I don't know that it's going to matter as much until you have like something repeated that you're doing. You know what I mean? Like if you're making,
yes,
like if you spend all your time trying to figure out who your audience is before you ever make anything, like there's no point. Like, I don't know how many times, like sometimes you're better off just writing blog posts and then seeing what gets traction and figure out what part of you people resonate with more and then go towards that. Like that's how I got kind of deep into OmniFocus back in the day. It's like, well, I wrote some blog posts about OmniFocus because I was learning it at the time, and that's what got traction. And so I kind of went down that road, and that's what took off. Here we are.
Yeah, and that's the thing. In this chapter, he's really just talking about find those craft communities and your focus communities and just hang out there.
Right.
And this is kind of before you identify that core community. And he says that the way that you become interesting is that you show that you're interested. And so you hang out at the Mac Power Users Forum and the Obsidian Forum and the productivity forums and listen to the podcasts and connect with the people that are in those places. And that's the part, like, I've done that for a while. I understand totally the craft community and the focus community. Like, that part clicked with me, but the aha moment for me was like how those two intersected. And that kind of gets into the next chapter. So let's go there now. The next chapter is chapter 11, Build Your Audience. And this is where you lean into the core community there. And you find those people who are interested in your work. This is where like all the advice about finding your niche and niching down, like that's what you have to do. But I feel like you can't really do that until you've participated in these other communities for a while and you start to see how these things overlap. This really is the point in the book where it starts to get into some things that are beyond where I'm currently at, I feel like. He says that to succeed, you need an army of people who love what you do. I'm not at that point. I do want to start building that community around faith-based productivity. I recognize that's my core community and just figuring out how I can serve those folks. To sustain your audience, you need to consistently deliver value, charge the trust batteries, all that kind of stuff. And I like the direction that this is forcing me to go from chapter 10, having identified that core community. I feel like the path forward is clear, but I also feel like this is the point where he's talking about things that I have not experienced quite yet. And it gets even worse in chapter 12. I shouldn't say worse. I'm not trying to paint it like this is beyond me and he has nothing else for me at this point. But this is the point where it starts to become more conceptual and less practical in my head.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Because I feel like the whole find your people bit, like you and I have been at this long enough that like we kind of know that. Like even with Bookworm, we kind of know where that lands. But you get to this and it's like, okay, well now we've got like this big community aspect of it. And I feel like right now in like just culture and society, like we're kind of like as a society trying to make that more of a thing. Like even the Web 3.0 thing, like even that has kind of an homage to this concept. And it's trying to like bring people together and build that communication and connection to people. Like Gary Vee has this nailed, I think. But obviously he's at this been at this sort of thing a lot longer than we have. Because he's really good at connecting with people. Like as much as like we can give Gary grief for the things he does and how insanely energetic the man is, like he's done talks with a phone number that you can text on his shirt. Like he wants to text with you. And if you text him, he will text you back.
Yeah.
Like that's what he does. Like he wants to connect with his audience. And that is just at a whole nother level that like I can't even process. And I don't know that Chase is saying, go do that. Don't put your phone number on your shirt and walk around. I don't think that's what he's saying.
Yeah.
But
No.
at the same time, like when you're connecting with everybody, like this has now become a great big ordeal. And that's a whole nother level. Like I feel like we could only aspire to hit that point right now anyway.
Yeah. And I guess the thing that strikes me from this is that this is going to take a while. There's some good principles here about building that audience, that community. There was a Gap book that I read about building community. I forget what it is now. It was a colorful book. If I can find it, I'll put it in the show notes. But there's lots of little things that you do. You build it like one person at a time. And you just got to stay on your path and not worry about how long it takes.
Right.
And that's kind of leading into the last chapter here, which is chapter 12, launch, maybe mistitled chapter here based on like what we just shared.
Right.
Like this is not something that you just build up to, plan, and then do once. When I hear launch, I think of like Jeff Walker and the product launch formula. That's not what he's talking about here at all. He basically saying like, you got to keep doing this. He's got another visual here of a circle where you create, share, promote, cultivate community. And then you just keep going. He says you should be soft and vulnerable in creating, but bold and ferocious in sharing. I think sharing is the thing that I struggle with. It sounds like reading this chapter, I'm not the only one who struggles with this, but recognize that you're not your work, going back all the way to chapter 1. So what you make is not, your identity is not tied to that, and that you're never going to make everybody happy. And then combine that with the fact that mistakes are part of the process. That means you did something wrong. It doesn't mean that you are wrong. He shares a really hilarious story, by the way, in this chapter of when he's a kid at a wedding and he intercepts the the tossing the bouquet, and everybody's laughing at him because he like makes this big diving catch in front of all the ladies and holds it up triumphantly because he's like, oh, this is a game I just won, doesn't realize what just happened. But I the big thing for me from this chapter is enthusiasm is more powerful than confidence. So that is the thing I need to work on when it comes to sharing, is even if I'm not confident in the things that I am creating, I can still share them with enthusiasm, believing that I'm making these in order to build my community and help people like me, people who are struggling with some of the same things that I've struggled with. That I can get on board with. Just telling me, hey, be confident when you share stuff. Yeah, I'll try. But when you say be enthusiastic in sharing stuff, okay, that I can do.
Yeah. As long as you're genuine and you're excited about it, like the rest of it just kind of comes along for the ride, because people, generally speaking, are willing to go along and they can see your heart behind it, whether we like to admit that or not. You can tell when people are faking their way into marketing and when they're genuinely excited about something that they're releasing. Like, you can tell the difference. You really can. So don't do the former, do the latter.
Right. There's one additional part of this book called Read This Last, at least in my version there was, where he tells a sad story about somebody that he connected with who died in an avalanche. And I guess that's a whole story that we missed in the beginning. He actually got caught in an avalanche,
Right.
but he survived it. So he tells this story at the end of the book of this person that just loved life and was very creative and got caught in this avalanche and ended up dying, and kind of uses that as a way to instill this feeling in you that life is short. You don't know how much longer you've got on this earth, so you better start creating. And I'm doing a bad job of communicating it. He did a much better job. There is a very strong call to action at the end. Like, you really need to create this thing that's inside of you, because you don't know how much longer you're going to be able to do it. And if you don't do it, you're robbing not just yourself, but the world of your contribution. I feel like it's a very effective way to end the book.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Basically, it's a story to encourage action and not just complacency. It's like, I don't have time to create. Like, no, you do. You just got to be willing to give up something to do it, generally speaking.
Yeah.
Whether that's...
It's always going to cost you
right,
something.
whether it's giving up watching a football game or giving up going out for dinner. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's a bad example, but you get my point. Like, you can make the time. If it's really that important to you, you can make the time.
Yep, exactly. All right. Action items?
Let's do it.
All right. So I've got 2 of them, and I think I mentioned both of them already. The first one is I want to identify when I am going to create, and I've kind of already been working on this, but I want to create a schedule, and I will consider this complete when I have actually been able to follow through on that schedule. But I have been thinking about this, and I'm I'm optimistic about how I'm going to be able to slot this into my day. And the other thing I want to do, and this is kind of related, is create my prompt for the next day before I leave. I've got my index cards right here. And so I actually have been using the Ugmonk analog to write out my 5 tasks that I'm going to be working on today. And I'm doing that not on the cards that come with the Ugmonk analog, though. I think I shared with you, I went through a big, long search after talking to Patrick Rohn on Focused to find some fountain pen friendly index cards. And I stumbled upon, they are Exacompta blank cards, which you can't even find online in the US, but Anderson Pens is going to get them for me. So that's cool.
Nice.
So I have these cards, and I want to start writing the prompt on one side, and then I'll write the tasks on the other, so I can have the prompt staring at me when I sit down at my desk at the beginning of the day, and then just flip it over when it's time to actually work. So those are my 2. What about you?
Nice. I have 2 as well. I have one, I'm trying to like automate all of these small things to try to make those a little less of an issue, so that way I can actually get through things. So that's one thing. Two, I guess I've got three here. Two is I want to make sure I've got my routine in place as well, and trying to just make that something that I'm like, I know when I'm going to create, I know when I'm going to do all the different pieces. Like that's what I want to make sure that I'm doing. So I just want to make sure I have that routine in place. And then the third one is that I'm kind of working through this personal branding bit. And that's something that I know I feel like I've struggled with it in the past. I have had a lot of things that should be very obvious to me at this point, but for whatever reason has been complicated when it comes to branding. So like that's something that I really want to make sure I'm keyed in on and nailing. So really, really close on that one. But those are the three that I'm on right now. That's what I'm gonna do.
All right. Then I guess style and rating, my book. I'll go first. I really enjoyed the style of this book. I mentioned at the beginning, seeing the 4 parts and laying out the system in the introduction harkened to the systems format that we typically don't like. However, I feel it really works because of the subject matter. It's talking about being creative, which a lot of people feel, I think inherently they believe that this is just something that is inspiration based and you create when you feel it, and I don't feel it, so I don't create. So I feel there's a lot of value in taking a systems based approach to your creative routine. I feel like the chapters themselves contain, I mentioned this to you when I was putting together the outline. There's 12 chapters here, but I mentioned, like, I think there's a single big idea in each chapter. And I feel like we got to just talk about all of them rather than just talk about the different sections, which is how we would typically tackle a book like this. So I feel like the chapters are digestible. I feel he does a really great job tying them together. Most of the chapters end with like a single sentence that sets the stage for the next chapter, like using the key terms in the chapter title itself. So I feel it's very cohesive, and he's got a ton of cool stories to share. And I think it's a very entertaining book. I feel it's a very worthwhile book for anybody to read, because I feel there are a lot of people who don't consider themselves creative, and reading through this would probably change your mind. That being said, like, I don't think this had the impact on me that I was expecting it to have. Maybe that's just the length. And there were a couple things that really kind of rocked my world. I mentioned the Venn diagram, and that was like a big aha moment for me in terms of thinking about faith-based productivity. But it's 280 pages, and that's a lot of words to get through for a couple of aha moments. I don't know how you felt, but there were points in this book where I felt compelled to just kind of skim things and move it along quicker. I had to fight against that. And so it wasn't, boring. It wasn't that the stories he was telling, I was disengaged with them. It was just kind of like, okay, let's just see where you're trying to get to with this. I feel like it could have been shorter, basically, I guess is what I'm getting at. That being said, like, I really like his style. Maybe it's just the format for Bookworm. We have to crank through these books in a week, 2 weeks. If you're reading a gap book in between, it's a week. And so I think I read this one in like 7 or 8 days. And maybe that works against us sometimes. I could see that being the case with this one. I also think there's probably other books which are better in this genre, at least better in the place that I find myself. Now, like I said, if you don't consider yourself creative and you're like, why would I even read a book on creativity? This is probably the one to start with. But I've got an upcoming book, which I talked to you about already, which I feel is going to be more impactful than this one was, just based on what I've heard from other people who have read this book. So I liked this book. I would recommend it. I'm struggling with where to rate it. I think I'm going to rate it 4.0. Just because, like I said, it felt a little long, and I have a feeling that there is room at the top in this genre. So it's good. I would recommend people read it. It's not going to be on any like top 10 lists for me, but I am glad that we read it and we had the conversation that we had about it.
Sometimes I feel like a book is almost worth more in the conversation you get to have about it afterwards, at least for us.
Yep.
Like there are a lot of times we go through a book and it's like, okay, I'm really looking forward to talking to Mike about this, because like that's how I process things. Like, thoughts disentangle themselves over lips and pencil tips. Like that's the thing that I've kind of held on to, and I've yet to see that debunked. But whenever I write out my thoughts on it, that's one way of doing it. But the other one that seems to work really well is just talking to somebody about it. And I feel like in this case, I know that I gleaned quite a bit from this book reading it on my own, but I feel like going through this recording, I feel like I've been able to synthesize some of my thoughts on it quite a bit more. And this is definitely that type of book for sure. And I think there's a lot of gold in this. Like you were talking about the Venn diagram. To me, honestly, that creative pyramid made a lot of sense. I hadn't really thought about the whole mindset, habit, goals, consider it a direction or mission, whatever you want to call it, at the top. And like whenever you have those in place, like I haven't really processed that creative world in that way. So I'm grateful for some of those takeaways. And I've got, if you look at some of these action items that both you and I have down here for what we're going to take on, like these aren't necessarily small things. Like these are fairly large endeavors to take on. Like when you think about the ramifications and the 2- and 3-fold results from what could happen from these action items, like it's quite large. These are not just I want to go on walks in the morning. Like these are definitely some big tasks. So I don't want to downplay the book too much because of that. That said, you're absolutely right. Like he's got some interesting stories in here, but I didn't find myself like totally engrossed in them because they were so short. He had there's lots of stories, but they're like not even a paragraph long sometimes. And because of that, it was hard for me to stay connected with him, because especially in the first, couple parts there, it's like, okay, you're about to lose me. And like it was kind of hard to stick with it. Now, I don't know if that's because you and I understand creativity quite a bit. I feel we've thought through how to do a creative endeavor a lot, and this is kind of reiterating those things, and that's okay. It just means that we're probably not the best judge of the book because of that, because we have our own preconceived notions and could probably write half of this book as well. So we haven't. He did. So here we are. And, all of that said, like, I feel like it could be very helpful for somebody who's brand new to the creative world or wants to start making something regularly. Like, this could be very helpful as a base if you've never thought about this or never read up on it at all. It could be very good in that. If you have a background in it and you've understood, like, you need to be consistent, you've got to be, routine based. Like, if you understand some of those things about creativity, you're probably going to have the reaction we do, in that, like, there's some gold in here, but there's like a lot of like, why is this 280 pages? Like, that's probably the reaction you're going to have with this. So all of that said, I think you rated it absolutely correct. I'm going to put it at 4.0 as well. I think you're right. There's some headspace where you could do better than this. But at the same time, I think there is a lot of good in this. So again, if you're interested in taking on a creative role or an endeavor of some kind, a side thing, this could be a good jumping off point for you, for sure.
All right, so let's put this one on the shelf. What's next, Joe?
Yeah, so the next one up, I'm kind of excited about, like, genuinely, Yes to Life by Viktor Frankl. And for as much as we've held up Man's Search for Meaning as like this doesn't equal a 5.0 because it doesn't add up to Man's Search for Meaning, I would love to know if that's Viktor Frankl or if that was just that particular book. And I'm excited to go through this and just kind of figure out what, because this was a series of essays that was written after he wrote Man's Search for Meaning. So yes, I'm kind of excited to go through this one with you, Mike.
I'm excited to go through it too. I've had it for a while, but I haven't read it. I don't know why. So, yeah, we're going to read that one next. And then after that is the book that I foreshadowed, The Messy Middle by Scott Belsky. And I have heard from so many people that I admire creatively that said that this book is amazing.
Yeah.
It's also very long. It's like 380 pages or something like that. I mentioned to Joe, it's kind of in between the current book, which Creative Calling is 280 pages, so it's not a short book, and Paid to Think, which is ginormous. I can't believe we actually covered that book. But this one's kind of in between that, and it is going to take a while. So I wanted to ask you before I sprung it on you. I will mention if you're going to read along with us, you're going to want to start this one a little bit early.
I appreciate you not just springing it on me.
I'm going to make up for it after that,
Yes.
I think, with a super short book. So, all right. You got any Gap books?
I don't. For some reason, this book, Creative Calling, it took me a while. I don't know why that was. It took me a lot longer than I was planning, but yes. So no, I do not. You?
I do. I actually read this one already. I read The Coaching Habit by Michael Bungay Stanier. I don't know how you say his name. It's a great book, though. It's about asking better questions when it comes to coaching. And this is not just like, used to think of coaching as like productivity coaching. I'm realizing that coaching actually is an essential leadership skill. And this is a very effective book on just asking specific questions which open up really effective conversation. It is kind of crazy how simple it is in its approach, but I can totally see how this works. And I've actually started applying some of this in my life already. And it's really, really good. So I would definitely recommend this one. It's pretty easy read if you are interested in upping your leadership game. All right. Thank you to everyone who has tuned in for this episode. Thank you specifically to the folks who have joined us live. Always some cool conversation on the YouTube chat when we do that. And a special thank you to our Bookworm Club Premium members who are willing to support the show financially. $5 a month, $50 a year to keep the lights on. We really appreciate all of you. If you want to sign up, you can go to bookworm.fm/membership and you get a couple of perks. I do my best to upload all of my MindNode files. There have been a couple times where I've been a little bit behind. Eventually they do all get up there though. And so there are PDF and MindNode files, so you can edit them yourself if you use the MindNode app. And from all of the books that we cover and a bunch of the Gap books that we cover, I upload those as well. So those are all there. There's also some Gap book episodes that Joe recorded back in the day. There's a Bookworm 4K wallpaper that I created. But the big benefit you get is our undying gratitude. We really do appreciate the people who are willing to help us keep the lights on here. We outsource the editing. You help us buy some of the books. I mean, this is not going back to the thing about like your work versus your art. This is definitely art for both Joe and myself. And so every little bit helps, and we really do appreciate everyone who is willing to support the show financially.
Absolutely. We love you. And if you are one of those who reads along with us, you know to pick up Yes to Life by Viktor Frankl, and we'll cover that in a couple of weeks.